In the quiet hum of a roadside diner, a group of young men gathered, their laughter cutting through the air. Their target? A truck driver, a man they mocked for his weight and the dirt under his nails. The driver, sitting alone, kept his eyes on his plate, ignoring the taunts as whispers turned into loud, cruel jokes. But what these men didn't know was that this unassuming trucker had a secret, a shocking one that would soon leave them speechless. As the group escalated their insults, the trucker stood up slowly, his towering frame suddenly commanding attention. For the first time, he met their stares, his calm yet unnerving demeanor shifting the energy in the room. What happened next would forever change how they viewed him, and themselves. Stay tuned to find out how this truck driver turned the tables in a way no one saw coming. The diner fell silent as the truck driver stood, his shadow stretching across the group of men. His voice, deep and steady, broke through the tension. "You think you've got me all figured out, don't you?" he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The gang exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence faltering. Something about the man's presence now felt different. The trucker took a slow step forward, his boots heavy against the tile floor. "I've seen your kind before," he continued. "Quick to judge, quicker to underestimate. But you never stop to wonder who you're really dealing with." His words lingered in the air, thick with a sense of warning. One of the men, trying to recover the upper hand, scoffed, "Yeah, what are you gonna do about it?" But even he sounded unsure. The trucker's calm gaze never wavered, and his secret remained locked behind his piercing eyes. The leader of the group, a wiry man with a cocky grin, stepped forward. "You think you're some kind of big shot," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "All I see is a washed-up trucker who's had one too many burgers." The others chuckled nervously, but their eyes kept darting back to the trucker, unsure of what might happen next. The truck driver tilted his head, his smile never fading. "You'd be surprised what I've seen out there on the road," he said. "Things that would make you think twice about picking fights with strangers." His words were calm, but there was an edge to them, as if he wasn't speaking hypothetically. One of the younger men, standing toward the back of the group, shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should just leave it, man," he muttered, but the leader ignored him. "Oh yeah, what kind of things?" he sneered, stepping closer. The trucker leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping just enough to make everyone strain to hear. "The kind you wouldn't walk away from," he said, his tone quiet but chilling. The gang's laughter faltered, and for a moment, the room was silent except for the low hum of the diner's fluorescent lights. The trucker's calm confidence was unnerving, and the sense that something was about to happen hung heavy in the air. The leader squared his shoulders, trying to mask the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You talk big, old man," he said, forcing a laugh. "But we're not scared of some truck driver with stories." He reached out, as if to shove the man's shoulder, but before his hand could connect, the trucker stepped back, his movements deliberate, almost too quick for a man of his size. "I wouldn't do that," the trucker warned, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. The gang froze, caught off guard by his reflexes. The tension in the diner thickened, and even the waitress behind the counter had stopped pretending to clean, her eyes wide as she watched the scene unfold. "What's your deal, huh?" one of the men blurted, his voice cracking slightly. The trucker didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, and for a split second, everyone tensed. The leader smirked, trying to hide his nerves. "What, you gonna pull a trick out of there?" he said mockingly. The trucker slowly pulled out a worn leather wallet and tossed it onto the counter. It fell open, revealing something that made the waitress gasp. The gang leaned in, curiosity overcoming their bravado. Their leader's smirk vanished as his face went pale. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, taking a step back. The trucker's expression hardened. "Now," he said, his voice steady and commanding, "you've got two choices. Walk out of here quietly, or find out what happens when you cross the wrong man." The room seemed to shrink as the gang realized they were standing on the edge of something far bigger than they'd anticipated. The leader hesitated, his eyes darting between the trucker and the wallet. Whatever he had just seen clearly shook him, but he wasn't ready to back down in front of his crew. "So what?" he spat, trying to sound tough. "You think a badge means you can scare us? You're not a cop anymore." The trucker's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was no humor in it. "You're right," he said. "I'm not a cop anymore. I left that life behind for a reason. But don't think for a second that means I've forgotten how to handle situations like this." He leaned in closer, his voice low enough to make the gang strain to hear. "You're playing a dangerous game, and trust me, I always win." Before anyone could react, the bell above the diner door jingled, and two men walked in. They were tall, rugged, and their sharp eyes immediately took in the scene. The leader's face paled further as he recognized the matching insignias on their jackets, something that only those who had been in the wrong places would know to fear. "Looks like we interrupted something," one of the newcomers said, his tone casual but his gaze hard as steel. The trucker straightened and nodded toward them. "Good timing," he said calmly. The gang exchanged panicked looks, the reality of their situation sinking in. The leader tried to recover, forcing a laugh. "All right, we get it," he said, raising his hands. "We were just messing around. No need to call backup." But the trucker didn't reply. Instead, he crossed his arms and waited, the air crackling with tension as the newcomers stepped closer, their presence making it clear that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The diner was silent except for the heavy breathing of the gang as they stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The two newcomers flanked the trucker, their imposing figures adding to the already suffocating tension. The leader forced a grin, trying to act casual. All right, he said, backing up slightly. "We'll leave. No hard feelings, right?" But the trucker didn't move. "You think you can just walk away after what you've done," he said, his tone calm, but carrying a sharp edge. "You don't get to bully people and act like it doesn't matter." He gestured to the men beside him. "These guys, they're not here for backup. They're witnesses." The leader blinked in confusion, and one of the newcomers pulled out a phone, showing that he'd been recording the entire confrontation. "It's all here," the man said. The trucker chuckled, slipping his wallet back into his pocket. Sometimes it's not about muscle, it's about knowing how to make a point. And as he walked back to his seat, the waitress couldn't help but smile, knowing she'd just witnessed something extraordinary. The trucker finished his coffee, his calm demeanor now fully returned. The waitress approached, still in awe of how effortlessly he had diffused the situation. "You didn't have to do all that," she said softly. "But I'm glad you did." The trucker gave her a small nod. "People like that need to learn there are consequences," he replied. "Sometimes, standing your ground is the only way to remind them." Outside, the gang was long gone, leaving behind only the faint sound of their retreating footsteps. The two men who had walked in to help gave the trucker a quick wave before heading out themselves, their roles complete. "Take care out there," one of them said as the door swung shut. The diner felt quiet again, almost peaceful. As the trucker paid his bill and headed for the door, the waitress called out, "Will we see you again?" He paused, looking back with a warm but enigmatic smile. "Maybe," he said. "Depends on the road." And just like that, he was gone, leaving the small diner and everyone in it forever changed.